So like Debbie just said, my name is Stacy. I'm with Stacy's Custom Cakes in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm a small home-based bakery, a cottage food vendor, and my specialization is in custom cakes. It's kind of in the name, so it gives it away. But what I specialize in is making unique desserts for people. And one of the avenues that I use to do that is through edible printing. So, like Debbie said, I've been a customer of Icing Images for at least 5 or 6 years that I can think of, maybe a little bit longer. And what I really like about Icing Images is how they are never satisfied with what they currently have on the market. So, one of the things I want to talk about tonight is the new colors. And the new colors are able to reproduce color as you would expect it to be in the real world in a much more vibrant, much more accurate manner without having to monkey with your printer or adjust any driver settings and to get the results you really, really want. But before we can talk about that, one of the things I want to talk about is there's a danger in trying to compare a edible printer and a non-edible printer. And before we go any further, I'm getting over a sinus infection from a week ago, so my voice is still a little weird.
It's always
That
weird.
might, well, I'm always weird, but now my voice is catching up. So the reason you don't want to compare an edible printer and an inedible printer or a non-edible printer is the same reason why you don't want to compare two non-edible printers side by side. Because when you look at different manufacturers and different producers of the equipment, the way they interpret color is ever so slightly different. So if you take a print from, say, a HP printer and you compare it to a Lexmark or a Dell printer or even a Canon printer, they're all non-edible printers and they're all going to look ever so slightly different even with the same image. And you have that same kind of relationship going when you look at edible and non-edible printers for the same reasons. So one of the reasons behind that is the chemistry that goes into the ink. So one of the things that you can do is if you look at the ingredient list of Icing Images inks, you'll see that everything on that label is a food safe product. So it's things like water, things like FD&C colors, and other things that are not going to pose an injury risk or a health risk to your customers and your clients. Whereas when you look at what's in non-edible ink, there's all kinds of stuff in there. Petroleum distillates like oils and waxes. There's surfactants and solvents and anti-clogging and anti-caking things. All these different things that would be extremely harmful to a consumer, but are not harmful to you just in the touching sense. And that's why they include it. And one of the things that Icing Images has been working very hard on is changing their formula and working with the formula to reduce clogging. Because years ago, that was something that we had to work with a lot more. And we don't have to work with that as much today, thanks to those improvements in the technology and whatnot. So the bottom line on that one is you take an extreme risk if you test print something on a non-edible printer and expect it to look the same on an edible printer. So in addition to the inks, you also have the types of media or the edible papers that you're using. So for instance, when you look at a smart sheet is a sugar-free medium. And because of that, the makeup of the ingredients that go into the smart sheet is different from a premium icing sheet. Does that make it better? Yes and no. It depends on the application, the situation, and what you want the end result to look like. And I have a couple of examples that I want to show you later on about that. Another thing to think about is on the premium icing sheets, it includes a ingredient called titanium oxide. And titanium oxide is used in dioxide. Yeah.
Sorry, like
It's,
there's a missing link.
yeah. I swear I'm not on NyQuil. Not yet. That's in another hour. But one of the things that titanium does is it whitens and it brightens a color. So if you look at a lot of gel food coloring that is white or a super white or a bright white, you'll see that titanium ingredient in there as well. And that's what boosts up the whitening level on it. And that's an ingredient in the premium icing sheet that's not in the smart sheet. So if you take a look at the two side by side, you'll see a little bit of a difference in the color there. So that's something you want to be thinking about in the back of your mind, is that medium that you're printing on is going to impact how the actual image is going to look. So in my experimentation and whatnot, I needed a cheaper medium to do my test printing on. And what I found was that there's a brand of cardstock out there called Astro Brights. And it's the 63 or the 65 pound bright white. And it's a very, very, very close approximation to a premium icing sheet and a smart sheet. It's a little bit brighter than a smart sheet. It's a little bit dimmer than a premium icing sheet. So it's that perfect in the middle. And that's what I use when I do my weekly test prints and what I do when I do my regular test prints. Now, I don't stick it on a cake unless it's a decoration of some sort that's supposed to be removed. But as far as the brightness of it and the texture of it, it's very similar to Icing Images papers. So I use that as an alternative in order to do my test prints that are less expensive. So let's take a moment and talk about these new colors. So if you want to take a look here, what I have printed is one of my weekly printer test pages. And you can see right away how the colors have changed and how they're much more vibrant, much more vivid. I've had fewer issues with having to deal with any clogging on my printer. And one of my regular clients that I work with many, many times a year, after she received her last order, she said to me, "What has changed about your process?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" She said, "There's something different in what you're doing because the colors are so much more vibrant than they were." I said, "Oh, does that mean you weren't happy with them before?" She said, "Oh, no, 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 no. Don't get me wrong. There was nothing wrong with them before, but they're so much more vibrant, more vivid. What did you do differently?" And I took the opportunity to educate her that the company that I go with for all of my edible printing supplies had reformulated some of their inks to improve their performance. And she said, "Well, tell them that they did a good job because that's exactly what happened here." So if you look here, like the reds, the greens, the blues are much more rich, much more vibrant than what they were before. And the reason why is the basic colors in the printing scheme is cyan, magenta, and yellow. When you mix yellow and magenta, you get red. When you mix cyan and magenta, you get black. I'm sorry, you get blue. When you mix cyan and yellow, you get green. And the reason why on my weekly test print, I print those 6 colors is those are the colors that make up everything else in the spectrum. So I pay very close attention to these 3 where the main colors are overlapping to see how they work and
I
to
have a
see
question.
how they're interacting with the paper.
I have a question. I just noticed something in what you're saying. On those color, on the 3 circles, so magenta and yellow make red, not orange?
Yes.
Okay. That just kind of caught me.
Yeah. It's really wild. And one of these days, if there's enough interest, I might do a live on basic color theory.
Okay.
Because when we were growing up, you learned about the primary colors and how they blend together.
Yeah.
Well, in computer screens, it uses red, green, and blue. Red, green, and blue. That's what RGB stands for. If you ever see that on the reference to a monitor cable or anything like that. In printers, they use cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And it's the combination of those 4 colors that make up all the other colors. That's the reason why printers have a different result than what you would see on a computer monitor. It's because what's called color space is different between the 2.
Okay.
And it's a really wild, it's almost brain bending the way color theory works, because some of it is logical, some of it is not so logical. So I have a couple of examples here, and I have them in a leftover icing sheet bag because we always save stuff because you can always find another use for it. And I want to show you what some of these colors are capable of doing. So because it's Christmas season, I went on to Cricut Design Space and I found a couple of Santas. And if you're interested in any of these Santas, these are the image codes underneath. And all the Santas I'm going to show you in these examples are the same ones over and over and over again. So on this case, this is the smooth side of a Smartsheet. What I like about Smartsheet is I call it the high definition version of an edible image, because the smooth side captures the ink very, very well, and it also reflects the light coming onto the image. So it makes everything very, very vibrant. If I want something that's a little bit more muted or something that has a watercolor effect, I like to use the textured side of a Smartsheet. Smartsheets are unique in that they are a two-sided medium, so you can print on both sides. And what's great about it is if you look at the comparison here on these two Santas, you can see how this one has a little bit more of a like a video or a lighter or a photo type of effect, whereas this looks more of a antique style or a watercolor type of effect. And on a live that I did recently, I showed how to do watercoloring on Smartsheets, and that's a lot of fun.
Okay,
and
wait, keep talking, but can you show these like side by side more within the screen? Okay,
yep, that's what I was going to do.
Up and down. Okay, sorry, keep going. I'm learning you guys from his perspective.
And here's an example of what the same images look like on a premium icing sheet. So to lay all three of these together, this will give you an idea. And let's see, I think all of those are in frame. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, they are. All right. So, oh, sorry, I just want to talk so bad. Keep going.
No, it's fine. It's fine. No, you got questions too. It's all right. And what I like about this example here is that you can see what all of the different sheets excel at. Like the premium icing sheet over here, you can see that this is the whitest of the three. And that's because of the titanium dioxide that we talked about earlier, making the material brighter and whiter. The textured side, you get a softer look. The smooth side of a Smartsheet, you get a brighter look. So you can even combine these mediums together with different parts of an image and really make a popping effect. Like if you want something to be soft in your design, you can do it on a texture side of a Smartsheet. If you want it to be super bright, go to the smooth side. Or if you need something to be as white as possible, you can go with a premium icing sheet. And even if you look at like the skin tone and the beard in the three Santas, you can see that difference. And that difference is even more pronounced when you look at the more cartoony Santa in the middle here, just because of the color and the shading of the artist who did this work.
Okay, I have to talk. I'm dying here.
Go ahead.
So right now, the top that you're looking at is the icing sheet that has titanium dioxide to make it whiter. The middle is this Smartsheet, no titanium dioxide, but it's textured to the touch, sort of like a matte photograph. And then the bottom is the also non-titanium dioxide, but it's the smooth side, which a lot of people refer to as our high definition example. So I just posted it on the side for anyone who's looking at it. I want you guys to share what you see that's different, that's better. I'm curious to hear what you see, because when we do our testing in a house, we actually compare it to, we'll take the Smartsheets, we'll take the icing sheets, and we will print regular ink on it too, because that's our goal. But it's so hard to get there, as you stated. But when I'm looking at these, this is what I see. I see, if you look at the shading within the thumbs, look at the hand, the center Santa with, he's got his thumb up. And you see that there's some bluish tones in his hand on the premium icing sheet. And when you scoot down to the bottom, it gets crisper and it gets crisper. So his hand is very crisp. It doesn't have the blue shading in the thumb as much. There's some there because there's shadows within this. So then you also look at Santa's bag on the left-hand side, and you see different qualities of detail in each one as well. So that bag is supposed to appear almost textured like, I guess it's like a felt bag or something. and they don't appear very different on the computer. Yeah, no, I see everything. I'm like, you know, it's because that's the way that I look at it's just my trained eye. Like I even you can see if you can pull the premium icing sheet up a little bit. I want them to see the bag a little more. Okay, there you go. And then yeah, the center one too, if you can separate. So Santa's bag in the first left, and then you got to bring the whole thing up a little bit because we are now missing the there you go. Okay.
Starting to run out of camera space.
Yeah, no, you got it. You got it now. All right, so look at like Santa's bag to me on the premium icing sheet looks probably the best, but I see some blues in there, not just the greens. And then you can, hold on, my camera focus is in different, in my computer. But you can see the detail changes in each one. And when I'm looking at it, I like the center one better, but that may not be exactly what the image looks like. So one thing you got to be real careful of when you're comparing is, do these look, is it just that I like it better, or is that supposed to be the true color? And I know that I get caught up in like, I'll look at something and I'll be like, oh, I like this one the best. But then I go back to the original one and I'm like, oh, wait, that's not the way it's supposed to be. Santa's beard on the right side, in the center, I see more yellow in it. The top, I see more white, which makes sense because there's titanium dioxide in it. But again, I see more detail in his beard in the bottom one. So it's really, yes, the premium sheet does seem to have more shading. And so are you going to talk more about titanium dioxide later?
I can if you want me to.
Okay, I'm not sure if you know where I'm going with this.
Not quite, but I'm sure you'll give me a hint.
Golds.
Oh yeah, of course I'm going to talk about gold.
So I don't want to, because that does, the titanium dioxide has an effect on certain colors when they sit over time. So, I mean, you can even see when you look at Santa Claus on the right side and you look at his elbow, the farthest to the right. And yes, Renee, you can watch the replay. It always comes right back on Facebook where we are right now. And you look at Santa's elbow, the one that's to the farthest, I guess it's right. Yeah, that elbow. Up top, to me, it looks orangey. And as you come down, it gets clearer and clearer. So once it hits that smart sheet, I see a better looking image on the reds. So anyways, I got all excited and I needed to say all this stuff.
That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
But one of the things that you were saying over and over and over again is, I'm capturing this detail better here. I'm capturing that detail better here. And that's something that if you ever work in art with different types of mediums, such as a canvas can be primed with oil, a canvas can be primed with acrylic, and the way it reacts to light and the way it reflects the color that's placed on it will change. Like for me, one of the things that I see that jump out right away is if I look at the Santa hat on the premium icing sheet, it looks almost a little bit flatter in some sense, because you don't pick up as much as this highlighting that's in these white spots up here at the top. And you also brought up a subject of it being perceptual. And that is something that you do need to take into account, because in the particular space I'm in right now, I'm in a studio lighting setup. Now, that doesn't mean anything fancy. It just means that I have a certain type of white light that I'm using, because I feel, to my perception, that it makes colors pop best for doing a live demonstration like this. If I was taking these exact same 3 sheets into my kitchen, where I have incandescent and LED lighting, they'll look ever so slightly different, because the whiteness of the lighting is different. And if I take these same 3 examples into an office building that has fluorescent overhead lighting, and thankfully those are becoming fewer and fewer, fluorescent lighting has a tendency to make everything look yellowy and kind of like a dirty, dusty yellow kind of color. So that's something you should also be thinking about, is which one of these products are going to fit best for the situation you're in.
And there's no right answer. That's the thing.
No,
Because
there is no right
customers
answer.
have it in different light.
Yeah. Like this past weekend, I made a sheet cake for a birthday party that was being held inside of a bar. And I was familiar with where it was being held, so I knew what the lighting looked like in there. The lighting was kind of dark. It was a lot of blue and a lot of red lights were being used in the atmosphere type of lighting. So I decided to go with the smooth side of the Smart Sheet because I wanted it to be as reflective as possible, because the artwork that the client chose was going to naturally be kind of dark. So I needed to capture and reflect as much light as possible. Whereas if I was doing that exact same order for a client who was going to have the party at their house, I might have chosen to use a premium icing sheet because I wanted the more white effect in the background. And it's just little things like that that you want to keep in the back of your mind as you're making the choices for what you're going to do.
Now, I do want to say something about this too. So I'm extremely analytical when it comes to color because that's what I do. I do color. A lot of the things that I see, people will never see. Your customers are not going to look at it that closely. They're going to stand back and go, "Oh, wow, look at that." There's those few people that are like me that are out there, but normally people aren't me. Thank God. And so you don't need to worry about this much detail. You have to just kind of figure out, what do you like best with your cakes? Because other things that come into play that we're not even discussing here are what's behind this image. So you'll there's different color icings, frostings, and things. And you can put this on color frosting, but it will, it will affect it, because you can see, even though these things are not transparent, you can see through each one of these sheets. So just something to think about. We're going into huge detail. Yeah, when you put it on yellow, it's going to change it too. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to mention that. I also wanted to say, when you were talking about different types of printers printing differently, even within the Canon series, when we test our inks, we test them on all our series of printers, and they do look different. So the entry level versus the platinum versus the wide format, they do produce different colors. So it's just important to understand all that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, keep going.
It's good stuff. Good stuff. And there was something you just said a second ago that made me think of something, and it completely just left my mind. So we'll see if I come back to it. So one of the things that I wanted to draw your attention to here is this bell and the buckle on all three of these images. You can tell that the intent of it is to be gold, and gold and any metallic in general tends to be not necessarily a problem when it comes to printing, but it presents a certain type of challenge. So even in the commercial print shop space, where they have all these different materials available and all these different technologies and special high-end printers that can do all kinds of amazing things, even in that world, they still struggle with metallics. And that's because when you look at something metallic, so in the case, that's not the example I wanted, that's the example I wanted. So in the case of this ball tool, if you're looking at it, you'll see a reflection of yourself. So like, you can't see it on this camera, but from my angle, because of the way the light reflects, I can see a miniature image of myself. And in case you ever wondered, that's how mirrors were invented. And that is a special property of metal that cannot be reproduced with ink for a couple of reasons. One, metal is metal, and metal tends to be harmful to the human body when ingested. So that's why a lot of people will put on their cake boxes that if they have anything metallic on the cake, even if it's an edible metallic, they still recommend that it be removed before service, just to avoid any risk of that. So that's something to think about whenever you look at this, because if I set this ball tool next to that bell, the first thing that you notice is that is shiny and blingy, whereas that is flat. And that's not because the printer is in a bad mood or you chose the wrong color. It's a limitation of the technology that's being used here. So there's ways you can work around that. The first way I recommend working around that is managing your expectation and managing the expectation of your customer. If someone brings me a artwork, say, a couple years ago, I did cupcakes for a wedding announcement and it had rings on it. So the rings themselves looked very brilliant on a computer screen, but that's because a computer screen lights up. So you get more effect of that. But when it was printed, it had a more dull or a flatter effect like this. So a way I worked around that is I used a luster dust or a highlighting dust on it. So here's an example of one that I did yesterday. And this is on a premium icing sheet. So I'm going to hide these two here for a minute. And I'm going to set these two side by side. So I think earlier it was harder to see on the overhead camera. So we might need to switch back to the other camera, Lori, for this example. But if I pick these two up and I hold them up, there it is. At that angle where the light is catching it, you can see a shiny effect on the buckle and on the bell because I hit it with a little bit of luster dust. So if we go back to the overhead now, I want to show you how easy that is. So I'm using Bling highlighter dust available from Icing Images. And what I think is really cool about this is they thought of everything and they put this little pad at the top of it. Now you might think this is to prevent it from spilling out, but that's not really true. What this is really here for is whenever you want to do accent dusting like this, you want to take a small brush, like in this case, I'm using a 4-0 from Innovative Sugar Works, and I'm just going to lightly tap it into that. And if you can see, well, if you could see what I'm seeing sitting here, you would see that I barely picked up any at all. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lightly brush around the darker areas, which might sound a little strange. Why am I brushing around the darker areas? It's because I want to enhance the metallic effect there. And this is also much easier and much faster when you do it whenever the print is fresh, before the ink has a chance to fully dry. So I'm giving myself a little bit of a disadvantage because this is very well dried from being done yesterday. And I just want to get one little stripe right here in the middle. Now, one thing you'll notice is I did not go anywhere near the shadowy area on the inside of the bell. And let me switch back the view again.
While he's doing that, we're going to be going to the Q&A in just a minute. So I hope you guys have questions saved up for us. You can start asking them at any point.
Yeah, please do. So one of the things that I avoid when I do this is I stay out of the shadow area. And that's because you don't want the shadows to be bright and brilliant. You want the outer areas to be brighter. And the light is really playing fun with this.
I know, it's good. It's actually really good. So the inside of it, there's shadows of a natural bell because it's inside of it, whereas the outside is not.
And what you're doing is you're using that little bit of embellishment and that little bit of highlight to accentuate what the printer has already done. And another thing to think about is we see things on the Icing Images page all the time where people print on a cookie or they print on a smart sheet or a premium icing sheet or even wafer paper, apply that to a cookie, and then they go over it with royal icing or sprinkles or something like that. And that's an excellent way to enhance what would otherwise be a flat image and give it more life. So with the Bling highlighter dust, you can do this with gold, silver, and the other color is a pink. What I like to do is I'll take a little bit of the pink and a little bit of the gold, mix it together, make a rose gold. And that can really make rose gold accents on an image pop out very, very well.
Right, so I just asked everybody out there who has worked with both a smart sheet and a premium icing sheet, has played with them both.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be curious to see. Okay, so Paula, you have, and thank you for the note, by the way, I did get it. And Paula, what were your conclusions as to which sheet you like better, or how do you use each one? Because there's room for both. And Joyce, same question for you. Everybody who has. And then guys, go ahead and start asking some questions here if you were kind of holding questions back. A lot of the stuff that Stacey was talking about is stuff that's been on Everything Icing Images lately. We all watch that, and we want to know where your questions are, and especially gold. Gold is just one of those colors because it cannot, flat printing cannot reflect back the same way. Right. You're not going to get that same effect as if you add a little bit of gold to it. Doesn't take much. You saw how much he did, and that was fantastic. Yeah. Karen, what do you think too? Okay, go ahead.
Another thought I just had about doing gold is if I'm working on something that is like a lot of gold, like it's say it's a golden plaque, like you're doing a retirement cake for someone in the Navy and they want a photo of the plaque from their ship or something else like that, that's either gold or bronze or silver. What you can do is go over it once it's dry, go over it very lightly with airbrush luster dust, or what am I thinking? A Meramist makes a color, a gold sheen color, and it works really well for something like that. You don't have to go over it very heavily, but just go over it enough to give it a little bit of that bling effect, and that will help pull out that gold color a lot better.
And something else to watch too. So one of the questions on Everything Icing Images was about the fact that their colors were changing a bit on the gold. And that, again, we're going into that flat area that we were talking about. And even when you look at the bell that he was showing, the inside of the bell was darker. There were some blues in it. Sometimes there's greens in it. And so what happens, and this is kind of one thing I did want to address, and I know you have comments on it too, is whenever first of all, if you have a poor quality image with a gold or any metallic on it, the colors are going to come out horrible, and especially as they sit. Lights will torture them, but also remember when I mentioned titanium dioxide, certain acids, titanium dioxide, those kind of items, if there's a lot of them in your icing or even in the icing sheet, and there's not a lot in the icing sheet, there's none in the smart sheet. Those can, especially when you have a poor quality image, can affect the image as it sits, especially if it's in a fluorescent light. All of that will degrade things. So I just kind of wanted to mention that. That's one advantage of the smart sheets is there's no titanium dioxide. Corn syrup does it too, and lemon juice.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Those are things that can change colors as they sit. They have a chemical reaction. Now, Karen says she uses the smart sheets when she wants more body to the image, uses the premium sheet for flexible applications such as banners. And Paula says she likes to use the premium icing sheets more for images on Oreos. She likes that they are thicker and you can use colors under it instead of white chocolate. So those are all, everybody does things differently. So that was some great insight. And Joyce, I'm waiting for you, my dear.
Yeah, and some other things you can do to help mitigate that, like anytime I work with an edible image that's going on a cake that has lemon buttercream on it, I usually will back the image with a thin sheet of SmartFlex fondant. That way, and I use SmartFlex because it is very, very, very thin. Like I can roll it to about a 32nd of an inch. You can practically see through it. It's the thinnest setting on my sheeter, but I will roll it as thin as possible and then mount my image onto that. And that little bit of barrier will help prevent the citric acid in the lemon buttercream from interacting with the colors in the image as the image sits there.
Okay, that's a great one. Okay, I typed, but it kept changing what I said. Oh, autocorrect. Yeah, it does that to me. So who has questions. We fed you a ton of information. We wanted to have more Q&A time. So please start asking questions if you have them. If not, we start rambling again.
Yeah. Oh, while people are typing up their questions, I did have someone ask me a question about why things are acting differently this time of year. And that's because a lot of us, even those of us in Florida, have the heat on. And one thing that you should know about heat is it's really good at drying out things. That's why you have a clothes dryer. And whenever the heat is running in your house, and this is less pronounced in homes that use a boiler that have radiant heat, either in the floor or from a radiator, but in homes that have central heating that use forced air, like you have registers on the ceiling or on the floor that blow hot air around, that movement of air and the heat behind it will dry out the space. That's why a lot of people, like whenever I lived in Pennsylvania, you could always tell winter was coming because the humidifier came out, so you wouldn't wake up completely dried out in the mornings. And that same type of thing happens with your mediums. So you could experience your sheets being more prone to cracking in winter weather, and your inks will also dry a little bit faster. So for some people, we normally recommend that you print on normal quality on the matte photo setting. You may need to adjust your settings a little bit to help offset some of that. And also, it's really, really important to keep all of your icing sheets inside their bag and sealed right up until the moment that you're ready to put it in your printer. And once it comes out of your printer, if you're not immediately applying it onto your cake or your cookie or confection, you want to put it back inside in an empty bag to help retain the humidity that's in there.
Yeah, and that's not for everybody. Everybody's environments are different. The outside weather, the inside heating and air, moisture, and everything else. So you'll know what's best for you. And if you're in a really dry area, and our sheets work really well, like in Vegas and Arizona, a lot of people choose that. A lot of people choose that that our sheet because they work so well. But hi.
Hey, you're back.
I know, I just popped up. So it's like, boo. But, and they hold up well, but, you got to know your environment. If it does get too dry for you, you can throw a small piece of a damp paper towel in the backing, against the backing in the icing sheet bag. But remember to take it out so it doesn't get like nasty also. The smart sheets don't have that problem at all. When I think I told you this before, when I was in Vegas, that's when we got the smart sheet the first time, and I left it out to see what it would do. So that's all some great information, and it still can also apply when you're adhering it to icing. All that shifts to this time of year when it starts to dry out.